episode of Geek Shop. I'm Chetan, and with me today is, again, Chris. Say hi, Chris.
Hey everybody! Hello!
Okay, we have a special guest with us today. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nelson Caetano. I'm a cartoonist. I write and draw Darren's drawings as well as The Gathering Place.
Cool. So I'm gonna start right off the bat. I mean, I'd want to ask you your inspirations, but I see a little bit of. Do I see Jeff Smith in your style, particularly Darren's drawings? Like I was checking out some of the art for that, and it was like
It definitely creeps in there. It's hard not to, and then deciding to go black and white and just thinking about all the bone stuff, the original stuff. It just works out well playing with lights and shadows, and it definitely creeps in there. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the minute I saw that, I was sort of like, there's just this sort of, and it's like cartoony, but like really detailed at the same time. It's like a weird line you managed to balance on really well.
I try to simplify my drawing, again, being for kids and get that that immediate connection with the kids. But when I do any sort of like superhero work or sci-fi work, I always get very detailed, and so that element creeps in unintentionally. I'm always looking for areas to do a little bit of feathering or a little bit of hatching here and there. And so, yeah, I would say unintentionally it creeps in there. Yeah.
I think it's a nice. It's funny because I'm sure it's two parts of your brain battling each other. It's keep it simple, but I want to make this look cool. But it seems like that battle makes for interesting artwork.
I'm happy with it, and the feedback I've been getting has been very positive. So yeah, that's a good
Hey,
thing.
Chris,
Very cool.
once you
Very
just
cool.
mentioned that, now I'm starting to think about that. You're right. The influences and everything, and the line work is amazing. Your inking is great in this book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I went digital with Darren's drawings. I've never worked digitally, and so I figured, let's add that challenge on top of creating a book for kids, which I've never done. And it's been an interesting medium to work in, and I've been happy with the results. It's definitely sped up my production time. That's for sure.
Are you totally digital, or do you like? I mean, like layouts. Like when you're doing thumbnails, are you doing thumbnails on paper and then going to digital, or is there any point, or is it just totally digital?
With Darren's drawings, thumbnails, everything. I'll start off all digitally, and then this way I was able to manipulate, sizes, proportions, perspective, anything that needed to be done, everything right on the screen. And definitely sped up the process that way. I mean, I've gone back now to Gathering Place and gone back traditional media. I love getting my hands dirty, but with Darren's drawings, it was a personal challenge to work digitally.
And so with your other work, is it totally like, is everything sort of classic sort of, ink and pen, or are you coloring digitally? Are you like, is there any point when you sort of go in there digitally, or is it just all ink and pen?
Depending on the story, so I will go everything from pen and ink. I will go into ink washes, watercolors, but there are definitely a number of stories that I have digitally colored the work, so it's a nice balance of the two. And again, as an artist, I like to challenge myself, push myself, and experiment. I just want to find what will work best for the story. But as an artist, I'm always exploring and looking for new things and seeing what works best. Not that it's always successful, but
So mentioning your
it's always.
mentioning your digital work, what tools are you using? What programs and tablets or iPads or anything?
I'm working right off an iPad Pro, working with Procreate, and I've been incredibly happy with the results. Right on the printed page, it looks great. but actually working on the interface itself. I've tried Wacom tablets, and just don't get quite the same feel. I mean, it does feel mechanical, feels a little bit different, but I find working with the iPad a lot more comfortable than Wacom.
That's interesting because that's the
Cool.
first time I've heard someone say that, where comparing, standard display tablets compared to, handheld tablets.
I think a big part of it is the thickness of the screen. There's I think the term that they use is parallax in terms of
Yes.
where the pen touches the screen, and where you see that mark. Um, and I feel it's a lot closer on the iPad than on any sort of other tablet. Um, and then it's just a rather smooth surface to work off of as well. So and then it also helps that a lot of the inking tools that are built in are easy to manipulate and try to mimic traditional inking techniques as best that they can, and I get some really interesting results from experimenting with those settings.
Now that's interesting.
You get all of the I'm a tablet guy too, and I love the fact that you get all those benefits, but you also get a back button and a zoom in button.
You know what? The zoom in definitely helps. I'm not gonna lie. The back, the backup button is useful, but I try not to rely so much on it, or else I'll get stuck on a line just trying
That's
to
it.
protect
You
that
do like
line.
100 lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the zoom in feature definitely helps, especially now as I'm getting older and my eyesight. I'm starting to realize it's not what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Inking definitely has has its benefits when you can zoom in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so, as far as your other tools, like when you're doing ink and paint, are you brush, are you pens, are you everything? Like, what's your tools of choice?
Uh, More brush than pen. I find I'll start off with pen, and then things start to not go my way, and then the brushes come out, and the brushes will finish the page. I definitely prefer for brushes over pens, but I've actually gone back to working with technical pens. Early on in my career, I used to work as a draftsman, and I've gone back to a lot of those old
Oh,
Stedler
nice.
or Rapidograph. Yeah, those Rapidograph pens.
Yep.
Um, there's something about the thickness and the richness of the black that beats any sort of fine liner. I mean, I have worked with fine liners, and I enjoy what they bring to the page, but there's something about those Stedler
We had this
Rapidograph type.
talk, Chris, before about those pens, and they're amazing pens, but a task to
Yeah.
clean, to clean up.
They, they are. They are. I think I forgot all about that. I picked up a new set not too long ago and started experimenting, and I totally forgot about the cleanup. It is a bit of a chore, but yeah, I think it's worth it just for
But
the
you're
line
right,
work
the
that one
line
can get.
quality and the blacks. I mean, it's India ink in there. I mean, okay. I mean, I
Oh
know
yeah.
pick 'em up pens, and those fine liners say they use India ink or similar ink, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So, and brush wise, are you a brush pen guy, or are you an actual I got brushes guy?
I've got brushes. I mean, I usually stick just to two brushes,
Yeah.
just two different thicknesses. One for the the really fine work, and something really thick to really punch up those exterior lines. But yeah, brushes. And oftentimes the brushes will come in to clean up a lot of my pen work that just doesn't turn out right.
Now,
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. There's some. I do that too.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say I do that too. I often go in with a pen first, and then sort of brush afterwards. And to me, it's almost like sometimes the pen is almost like the guideline for my brush. Like I kind of look at it, and it's almost like a skeleton, and then I know I'm going to put the real muscle on when I do
Yes.
the brush. But for some reason, like I always think to myself, maybe I should just skip the pen and just go straight to brush. But for some reason, there's just something nice about having that initial line in pen for me.
See, that's funny
that I
because
sort of like to follow up.
I always
and
wondered
everything.
on that, because when you read interviews or watch videos from various artists and stuff, they never mention that. Most of the time, I thought you go in with brush first, then you do all the details afterwards.
I've seen it done both ways. I've seen artists come in with a pen, and again, having that initial line to work as a guide, and it also feels like it's been a practice line. You've done that curve before. You can
That's it.
handle it. And when you
Yes.
come in with the brush now, you come in with a little bit more confidence. But I've seen artists come in with a brush right over pencil, and it's like incredible. It's like
Yeah.
the confidence level is something else. And but I can also see that they're definitely more brush intuitive than pen. I mean, the pen will come in later to do some fine line hatches here and there to outline some fine details. But you can definitely see that if they're jumping in with a brush, they definitely love that brush.
Now, what brushes do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
use? Do
yeah.
you use like a sable brush, or does it matter what type of brush?
I do work with a sable brush. I've experimented with various brushes over the years, and it usually comes back to the sable brush. It's what I work with now. And again, I have two sizes that I work with um, to get into the fine details, or to get those really nice thick lines that really just punch up a
Now,
character.
here's a question for
Yeah.
sable brushes. I again reading online, and over the years now, sable brushes are harder to find now because they're trying to get away from that type of hair, aren't they?
They are, and I haven't found anything that's comparable to the sable brush. I'm usually good with maintaining brushes, and also if I see a brush, I'll always pick up a brush and keep it in my stock, and waiting for the day to be used. It's always good. I've always said it's always good when you see something that you like, always pick up an extra and put it in the drawer, because it's going to come in handy someday.
Yes.
Never thinking that sable brushes will be a hard find.
And both Chris.
Well, I mean, if you're cleaning repeatograph pens, then you must be cleaning your brushes
Yes.
too. So, I
Yes,
mean,
yes, yeah.
And
anybody with that kind of mentality has got to be keeping their art supplies in good condition.
I have technical pencils. I prefer working with technical pencils over like wooden pencils. And this is going back to the draftsman days of my earlier career. And I have mechanical pencils that I tell my students, these pencils are older than you are. You
Yeah.
know, every bit of equipment that you have, you can maintain for a lengthy period of time if you maintain it. And any artist, you're as good as the equipment you use, and maintaining that equipment
very
is
true.
part of
Very
that.
true. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, I know when I abuse my art supplies and I almost feel guilty.
Yeah.
Because every once in a while you sort of like, you'll be like, well, I don't really want to clean this brush right now. And then, you'll be like, I should.
I know. Sometimes it's like, you just put in so many hours, and it's like, oh, that's just great. You just want to get up, walk away, and it's like, no, here's another chore on top of that. So, yeah, it's always calculating that time into the day for cleanup as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't want to like bring a halt to anything, but your background is something that we can't ignore. So obviously you're into toys.
Yes. It was a hobby that started years ago, and I naturally assumed as the years would go on, it would sort of stop or slow down. But then my wife got into it as well, and she sort of supported this addiction, if you will. Yeah, so over the years, it's actually grown and grown even larger than I had expected, which is kind of neat, to have in my workspace in my studio. And it's also been great for my kids growing up. They would always come down, and they'll always want to see a piece or something, and they'll ask, "Can I play with that one?" I go, "Sure."
Nice.
Um, Yeah, because they do come off the shelf. That's the one thing I've always said. It's they're not there for life. They come down off the shelf and they get enjoyed.
That was my question coming up. That was like, no touch policy or what?
No, no, they're definitely enjoyed. Yeah.
That's awesome. And is there any like toys that you use as like particular reference, or do you have any particular favorites? Like I have a couple that I quite enjoy that I'm like I always look to for inspiration.
There are a couple of pieces that I'll take a look at, or sort of pose in different positions if I'm struggling with a particular pose. But I do have this. This is going back to the I guess the early McFarlane toys. Um, they had some really unique like sci-fi creature robot things, and a couple of them were actually two different characters that would actually join into one large character. But there's this really neat, I guess, metal element about it, the mechanics behind it, that every now and then, if I'm looking, for some kind of reference or inspiration on like a robot or a ship, I'll bring that character down and start rotating and playing with it, and then something will click and inspire something from that.
Yeah, it's funny because like some people use their collecting. They say it's like an excuse. They say, well, my excuse is, oh, I'm a cartoonist, so I can have toys. But every once in a while, there definitely is a few of the toys that you're sort of like, no, 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 this is actually like important. I need this.
Yeah.
I have a I have a Spider-Man that can bend in every single possible position. Actually, I think that's him,
That's
right,
neat. Yeah.
right there, like 1,000,000 points of articulation. He doesn't look.
Is
great.
that the big
No,
one?
no, no. It's a small
big
one, but
one?
it's apparently at the time it was the most points of articulation for like a small action figure, and it was like ridiculous. Like even his fingers moved. It was crazy.
Oh wow.
But
That's something.
But
Yeah.
what Nelson said is good is McFarlane changed a lot of that stuff with toys. Action figures. He made those amazing, amazing
In terms of the
toys.
level of detail, they were like little mini works of art. You could, and I think that was a big part of how I started collecting. Were those McFarlane toys? They would just look great on the shelf. It wasn't just something small like a GI Joe figure. Um, where it was a little bit difficult to balance on a shelf. No, those McFarlane toys, they were meant to be displayed and put out there as mini works of art, and then from there it just grew out of all of that.
Yeah.
And not even those toys. McFarlane, even looking at like his hockey figures.
Oh, they're incredible.
you
Oh
know,
yes,
they're-
yeah.
Oh, they're amazing. I mean, they're lifelike. I mean,
Yeah.
the likeness is, I mean, he puts a lot of work into it. His company puts a lot of work
yeah.
into those things.
So it's funny, actually, we had a previous episode recently where we talked about merchandising and creating toys for our own comic books and materials. Has that ever crossed your mind? Have you ever looked at something you've created and thought, this could be an interesting toy?
Um, I hadn't really thought of it, but now I'm thinking about Darren's drawings. Again, the book is really a storybook for kids, but it's also a coloring book, and so I want kids to be really active and take that ownership and really pursue the arts, their passion for the arts. But I wouldn't mind seeing Darren as a little stuffy, a cute stuffy, or maybe as a hard plastic figure that you can draw on with washable markers or washable crayons. That
That's
would be a
awesome.
neat little
See, Chris, that's
tie.
great. Yeah.
That would be really awesome. That would actually, that's awesome. I like the idea too that you encourage people to like color your comic book, because it's amazing how many artists sort of, like I have my comic book is sort of for teenagers, and the interaction with it I actually quite enjoy. Like I don't mind people, like I've seen people doodle on my drawings, and I'm sort of like, yeah, I like that. This is awesome.
I think a lot of it stemmed from growing up and always being told keep your comics in pristine condition, and always coming home
That's
and
it.
bagging
Yes.
and boarding them right away.
Yep.
But when I was younger, I would sit there or lay there and open up a comic and lay it out flat, and I would just draw and copy what was there. And so it became a very important tool for me as a very young artist. And so this idea of that they're collectibles and you can't open them, and people who brick them in those plastic casings for the value. Uh, they're meant to be open and enjoyed. So the idea to have a book that encourages young people to draw directly into the book or onto the book was actually twofold. It allows young readers to take ownership of the book, but also allows them to feel like they're collaborating with the creators as well. And for young artists, having that opportunity to say, "Look, my work's in the book. I colored those pages. I'm part of the story."
That's it. Yes.
It's a positive feeling, and it allows them to hopefully pursue the arts.
Yeah, that's cool. I did something similar in
And
one of.
Chris and I have been.
I was gonna say I did something in one of my stories where my character often fights like kaiju type monsters, like giant monsters in the city, and so I have one issue where I just didn't draw the monster, and at the beginning of the book I'm like, just put whatever monster you want in there.
Oh, that's neat. That is
So
neat. Yeah.
it's like I love that idea of like sort of being like inviting interaction and sort of being like, you make this part of yours, and I'm excited to see them. Like I think I like them more than anything else. Is see somebody, I drew this monster, and it's like, oh, that's so cool, So I definitely get
Well,
that.
what Nelson said is great, because I mean I did the same thing as you did. Buy a comic book, don't care about bagging, boarding, just open it up. No matter if it has 20 crease marks on it, it doesn't matter. And you're not even you're drawing out the panel by John Byrne or whatever. That was the fun part. And I think that's gone in comics right now, where like you said, it's the put it in plastic, board it, put it away, don't even look at the art. That's why I think three of us here, or most of the people we know, don't care about bagging it and boarding, or putting it in a plastic. They don't care about that. They want to look at the artwork. It doesn't matter how much that value on that book is.
Yeah, my most precious comic books are not like my mint condition GI Joe #1. It's that issue of Gru that I had when I was a little kid, and it's tattered, and I don't think there's a cover on it. But like, I love having that book, and I love opening that book and reading through that book. It's the greatest. It's the most important books to me are those. Anything that I have that might be in good condition and valuable, whatever. But it's like the those ones I had as a kid that I just cracked open and really loved, that I really have the most memories for. So it's very cool.
Yeah.
So now that brings up a question now for Nelson. What are your influences, artist-wise, comic-wise, comic books, movies?
Comic wise, yeah, they tend to vary, and it's through time. When I was younger, a lot of the artists I looked up to were artists who tended to draw very realistically, had a lot of detail in their work. Neil Adams, for example, always comes up to mind. And if I, ever got a book that had Neil Adams stuff, again, I would just lay that thing flat and just copy out those pages. And then as through time, I learned that stories can be told through different art styles, and oftentimes it's great to adapt and change your art style to as an artist to meet the needs of the story. So I never wanted to limit myself to one particular style. And I've seen artists who have been able to do that, rather successfully. But then I look at, I see artists today, Philippe Andrade, who's got this really unique, um, distorted, surrealist style. And it works so well with his stories. And I look at what he does and I go, I wish I could do that. Sometimes I feel like I am fixated on the realism. So I have been exploring a lot more a freestyle, looser drawing style for particular stories. And yeah, it's the challenge of adapting and adopting um, that vision. I mean, when we'll look at a blank piece of paper, it's easy to go to what I'm accustomed to, and now it's thinking out of that. So Comics are still the biggest inspiration, but yeah, there are times I close the books and I just sit down and watch a good movie, and I'll always go back. Yeah. Recently, I've been getting back into all the Star Wars films because my youngest son, huge fan. Like he's over the years he's gone from Doctor Who to Star Wars to all sorts of things. But we've been running through marathons of Star Wars films recently as the school year has ended for the two of us. We'll get home and it's like, let's watch another movie, and we'll just pop in another Star Wars movie. There's something so comforting about a movie that's so familiar,
Yeah.
and that I've seen tons and tons of times. Um, yeah, I mean, I enjoy anything new and getting, exploring new voices, but there's something about something so familiar like Star Wars that's just great.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, it's just a great series of films, like objectively. So it's, you can watch them over and over again because it's just, and as you grow, as you were talking about, like sort of maturing, how your style changes, even the way you watch something that maybe you watched as a kid will change as well.
But here's the thing. You won't understand this, Chris, but Nelson and I have kids, so when you watch it with your kids, it's a different perspective because you see it in their eyes and they're talking away about certain things and you're explaining it, and that's where the dad geek factor comes in, where you want to tell them the whole history, how they did this and that, and it just you pause the movie and you end up talking more about the things about the movie than actually watching the movie.
Yeah.
There were a couple of scenes where rewatching Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and I'm like, those scenes were hand painted scenes. My son's going, "What do you mean hand painted?" He's thinking, everything's digital, right? And I goes, "No, watch it."
Digital,
And
yeah.
we paused the film, and then called up some video and making of Star Wars, and let's look at that. That's all hand painted. That's incredible. That's amazing that they're able to do that. Why don't they do that stuff anymore? And I go, everything's digital now. It's quicker, it's easier, and it's
Cheaper.
cheaper. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of cool. I'm sure it's I haven't rewatched the Star Wars movies in a while, but I think I'm set to do it again. It's been a few years, so I think I might put them in. But
We did that with my kids, where during COVID time we watched all the Marvel movies,
Yep.
all the Star Wars movies, even all the Star Wars animated series.
Oh, neat.
Because and it was a fun adventure because my kids are at that time they were 12 and 8 years old, and at that time their imagination is just everywhere. Where they just want to sit and absorb everything. And it was interesting watching all those movies and just, I think as a parent, it was more fun me watching them as they're watching it.
Yeah.
so I guess, I mean, we were talking about that. Do your kids influence your art at all?
They do. They do. When they were younger, like really younger, they would come into the studio, always to see what I was working on. And then I'll get them some paper, and they would lay out their sheets of paper, and they would draw as well, and then they would have questions like, I'm not sure this is looking right, and so I would go into teacher mode, and we'll do like an anatomy lesson, and so they do inspire me and drive me to to work and get into the studio, and then there's some story ideas that. That they've read, like work that I've never released, that they're on me and say, Dad, you got to release that because that story idea, that's something else. Like that would work. I mean, that's like, and then they would give me the comparisons. They go, that's like, like Batman and Invincible put together, and I go, how? Like, but they see it and they go, that would work, Dad. You got to release it. I go, okay.
And that's your audience. That's your
Yeah,
audience
yeah.
that's telling you this.
Yeah.
Forget about us old guys. That's your audience.
And that's exactly it. For them to tell me, this is something I would read, and they tell me this. I'm not a big reader. I'd rather watch it on screen than read it. But that's a cool idea, and I go, okay, then there's something there. That's something to work on or revisit.
That's so cool. That is awesome. I mean, I'll be honest, as a, a person without any children, I often find myself in a void. So like, I'm sort of in a dark room working by myself with nobody to sort of throw ideas off. I can send ideas to friends and stuff, but it's kind of neat that well, first of all, it's cool because your stuff is obviously sort of very kid based, like you're comfortable. I wouldn't say writing for kids, but it's like it's got like a kid angle to it, which is cool. And then to have kids to be able to like throw ideas off is just so cool.
It's definitely been helpful. You know, working alone in a studio, as both of you have experienced. Sometimes if you don't have someone in the room to bounce ideas off immediately, working in a vacuum like that can be challenging. And I have those days where I miss working in a studio with a team of other artists that we can goof around and bounce ideas off of. So having that opportunity where my kids could come into the studio and you know really inspire me and push me and sometimes distract me, a very happy distraction, where then I'm able to return back to the table with fresh eyes and say,
Yeah.
that was all good. We had a great moment, and now I'm coming back here and able to continue what I was doing in such a more rejuvenated way. So it's definitely beneficial having others in the studio, especially when they're your kids and
And
they
one
motivate.
thing about kids is they're brutally honest on if they like it or not.
Oh, that they definitely are.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, trust me, I've gotten comments where I'm like, "Are you sure?" Then you want to ignore them, then you come back and go, "I better change this now."
Yeah.
So speaking of this stuff, what are you working on now?
I've gone back to the Gathering Place. There are still stories and biographies I want to dig into and delve into, and but also I want to explore different art styles as well. I've enjoyed the work I've been doing with Darren's drawings, but I want to be able to compile these single issue floppies into to a graphic novel where it will sit better in either a school or a library, where it can actually reach the audience that I'm intending it to get into, which are young artists. The artists and readers who have picked up the single issues, they've enjoyed it, but I think if everything's sort of bound in a book, it feels more, I don't know the word, more legitimate in terms of,
Yeah.
okay, this is a resource, and that's what I wanted this really to be, is a resource for uh, young artists looking for new inspiration, for art teachers who either want to share stories on Canadian artists that aren't your traditional Canadian artists. There's something about you crack open any art history book, it's always the same artists. And I wanted to bring a much more diverse group into my classroom, and through these stories, I've been able to do that. So I figure if everything's in a book, it'll seem a little bit more legitimate, and this way, more art teachers will, or even history teachers will be able to incorporate the stories into their lessons.
And I hate to
That's
say it, this is a talk Chris and I have had so many times before. When you have a floppy like this, North American attitude is, I don't want to read this. But when you have a collective edition,
Yeah.
it's a completely different mentality.
Oh
Yeah.
And
yes.
it's the same art inside, same story, but they don't want to see the term comic books, North America, it's a taboo.
yeah.
I believe there's still that stigma here in North America that comics are for kids. They're not legitimate forms of entertainment. They're the lowest form of entertainment. They're cheap
Not even
throwaway.
entertainment, lowest form of art also.
True. Oh
That's what a
yeah.
lot of people,
Oh,
yeah, a lot.
oh my goodness! It was years ago. I read an interview with Gil Kane, and he, like, you'd have your neighbors, and your neighbors would ask, so what do you do for a living? And he would tell people he was a line artist. and no one would question what do you mean, what's a line artist, what do you do as a line art?
Yeah.
And that was his way of telling people that I produce art, I'm an artist,
Yeah.
but he didn't want to tell people that he was a comic book artist because
That's
he
it.
knew
Yes.
the stigma that was out there, admitting you're a comic book artist. It's such a, like, it's a low level. For me, some of the strongest artwork I've ever seen has come out of comic books.
Oh, lots of amazing
So I guess
artists.
it depends
Yeah.
on your eye. I guess I don't know.
Yeah. That's funny because in Europe and Asia, it's like comic books are totally legitimate, and
Yes.
I've spoken at universities in here, and because they're like, "Oh, you're a comic book artist. Would you come speak at our university?" I'm like, "Sure," and so there's this. It's like a complete like because they're looking at like the Hergés from like Tintin and stuff like that, like
Yes.
who are considered totally fine artists in their own right. Like they hold galleries and everything like that. So there's this, and like a lot of the anime stuff is even considered very high art here. So it's like it's interesting how it's North America that just for some reason can't get over that hump of like there is comic books for kids. Like you can't deny that like an Archie is sort of something you flip through and you chuckle, and it is sort of not for kids totally because I still read them, but it's not necessarily high art in many respects. At least some of the issues. Some of them are actually quite beautiful, but then you sort of get to like there's this. It's like they can't understand that you can do more than one style, more than one story, more than one everything in a comic book. It's not just one and done single thing.
Yes.
So,
And it's possible it can change here in North America. I recently read a story where comic book art, comic book pages in terms of sales, have been on the rise, and a lot of
Yes.
art galleries are starting to pick up and showcase a lot of these artists and exhibiting as they would, any sort of fine artist. And it's been picking up since the pandemic. A lot of people have, I guess, been looking where to invest money and put money where they enjoy, and I guess a lot of people out there really do enjoy comics and comic art, and they've been investing in it, and the art galleries are starting to realize this, and I guess they want a slice of that pie.
it sounds like the
And I
type of
found
thing
that
you're. Oh, I was going to say it sounds like the type of thing you're doing would actually be really good as a touring thing at schools.
Yeah, I think so. That would be
yeah.
neat, actually, to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm limited to the amount of time I can do that, being a full time teacher.
Yeah.
So I guess the my school has the exclusive rights to me. But it would be it would be something to consider. Once I do retire and go to school by school basis and sharing these stories and sharing the books and bringing in the actual artwork itself and showing these young kids and young artists there's more than one style, there's more than one way to tell a story through comics. It doesn't always have to be about superheroes, which they're great.
Yeah.
Most of my collection is all superhero based anyways, but uh, you can do so much with comics. For me, it's probably the most cost effective way to get stories out there. Like, I would love to make movies, but I don't have the
Mhm.
budget. So being able to have the budget to put together a comic book and still tell fantastic stories that are out of this world, really,
Yeah.
is a great platform, and I don't see why
That's what you were saying earlier. Nowadays, I mean, okay, in the old days, you could create your comics, photocopy it, do whatever.
yes.
Nowadays, you have so many outlets to show off your work. I
Oh,
mean, you
yeah.
have social media everywhere, and even printing cost is cheap now.
Printing
No, I mean,
costs.
not reasonably cheap,
Yeah,
reasonably cheaper than what it used to be,
that's
but
true.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of more options now.
Oh yeah. I mean, the number of incredible web comics I've read over the years. So long as you have access to the internet, which most of us do, you have all these stories out there
Yes,
to
that's
share. You don't
it.
have to worry about printing. You don't have to worry about carrying all this back stock of books that you can't sell. The stories are out there for the world to read.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's really awesome.
So Nelson, you were talking about your artwork and stuff. Question, and this is a question I always ask people: what size do you draw your artwork in?
Um, 11 by 17. I mean,
Oh,
sort of 11 by
perfect.
17 sheets. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll
Old
go a little bit
school.
larger. Yeah, sometimes I'll go, up to 12 by 18, depending on what sheets I have or what I'm working with. Like if I'm doing watercolor, there's a particular brand of watercolor pads that come in 12 by 18 that are absolutely incredible. And then, I'll cut them down for storage, but I like to work really, really large and then, shrink
Nice.
everything down. And again, it goes back to, not being able to zoom into my work. So if I can get to work larger, that's the again the beauty of digital, being able to zoom. But in traditional, I like to work really, really large and get those big brushes out.
And also, I think working large and what you mentioned about you being a teacher, have you shown your students your artwork like large size? Because
I have. I've actually over the years. Again, it's working part time in comics. Sometimes I have to find creative ways to be able to produce work, and so I'll actually bring in my work into the classroom, and I teach a specialty art class where we focus on illustration. So we learn about illustrating children's books and comics, and so it's the perfect opportunity for me to bring in my pages and show them what I'm working on as we're going through a lesson. And I'll explain why I made certain choices. And then as the students are working on their pages, I'm working on my own pages.
the reason
I
I
So
ask
remember
that is,
I've heard stories of people at the Joe Kubert School who used to talk about like the best part about being in the school was sitting there with Joe working with him. Like he would do the same thing where he would have his own pages and the students would be working on theirs. And so the idea of sort of being there and every once in a while walking over, seeing what he's working on,
yeah,
almost as if you're in a studio setting. Like it's also a good lesson at being in a studio setting in your class, which is what you're doing, which is where it's sort of like this collective. And there might be people who are higher up on the rung of, artists, because that even happens in
yeah.
studios where there's the old timers and the new guys. And so what you're really doing, you're not only sort of showing them how to draw, but you're really giving them the real sort of studio life.
Yeah, it's sort of that mentorship that occurs by modeling, how to act and behave in a studio setting. And yeah, I'll have students who would walk by me and as I'm inking, and they're like, "How do you do that, sir? Like, how is?" And it's like, let's work on this." And my page will go aside, and we'd work on it. And um, I, it's just the perfect opportunity. I think when you have um, a studio space where you have various levels of artists at different points in their careers, being able to mentor everyone else. That's the one big thing I miss about working in a studio is that atmosphere, and so being able to take that into my own classroom and model that for my students is great for me. And I know they take a whole lot of that with them. I mean, as students come back after, over the years, and they tell me, yeah, this is what I saw in classroom is the same thing I see in, in post secondary or in, the real world in a real studio. And so they
oh,
appreciate that
nice.
the fact that they were able to get that at such an early age
Yeah.
and have that modeled for them.
And also,
So
as
it is,
a, oh,
I was gonna say it is really, really cool. Like, I didn't get much of that in high school or in school at all.
no,
And
same
then I
here,
remember,
same here.
mentorship was such a big thing when I got out into the real world and even in college. And, I remember having an illustration teacher who used to just sit there and he used to draw his own stuff too.
Mhm.
And, he was so far beyond us. So it also allowed us to see how, like, sometimes you'll see a drawing and you'll see, be like, I don't understand how a human being could have made that.
Yeah.
And so if you have one of those human beings doing that, you suddenly go, oh, so this is physically possible. Like this isn't some magic that I don't understand. And it can really, really influence somebody in the right direction.
It's definitely one of the things I've tried over the years, to explain to my students is to demystify, the magic that people view art as. It's a skill like any other. Yeah, there's some of us who have more of an aptitude for it, but it's like anything like sports or music. We can all kick a soccer ball, um, but our skills would improve if we kick that soccer ball every single day.
Yeah.
So it's like art. And so by me drawing in the classroom, and showing that I draw every single day. It models to them, you know what, if I want to improve, this is something I want to pursue seriously, that, yeah, you have to take it to the next step and draw and ask questions and get more involved.
And
Yeah,
also
when I tutor people,
I
oh, go
was,
ahead.
one thing also, what you just mentioned is when you see someone drawing and when you do see the original art,
Yeah.
when you see the whiteouts and all the erasing,
Oh
everything,
yeah.
it, as a young kid, you're looking at it going, oh, he makes mistakes also, because not everything's perfect. You hide it, but when you see the original art, you see all the mistakes the artist made. And
It
as a young
yeah.
artist, that opens up your mind, saying, wow,
I remember when I first started drawing comics. There was always something about being perfect on the page, right? Never using whiteout. Like I never
that's
thought,
it.
that
Yes,
that's a thing, right? And that's a great point you bring. I remember the first time I saw Mike Mignola's work in person, and I'm flipping through his pages, and I'm going, "Wow, there's a lot of whiteout. Like
yeah.
he doesn't make mistakes. Like there's no way he makes mistakes." So it was the first time that I thought to myself, you know what, I am allowed to make mistakes, and it's okay.
Yeah,
And it's really important to for young artists to realize that as well.
That's
It's
it.
okay to make mistakes, especially when you're young. Make those mistakes. That's where the learning comes from.
yeah. Always make mistakes because
Oh
that's,
yeah.
happy accidents are the greatest pieces of,
Oh exactly.
No, but
it's
Exactly.
the greatest gift.
when you're a teenager and you're getting, let's say, teenage me getting into comics and stuff, I had that same mentality. Every line has to be perfect,
Yeah,
and you don't think about that because then when you first time you see original art, you're like, it blows your mind away. You're
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah,
yeah, like Mike Mignola, you know, why is he using whiteout? Same thinking.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's very cool. And I mean, your stuff has such an interesting background that you have this sort of idea of educating people while creating your comic books, and that's such a unique thing because again, a lot of comic book artists either live in a vacuum or sort of have a different thing. But your background, your drive is a very unique drive, I think.
It comes back from being a kid and a young artist and always wanting to learn and be better. And I remember being in elementary school, and as my skills started to grow, my friends around me would recognize that, and they would comment on it, and I would tell them, we're like the same. We're doing all the same stuff. You can do it too. Just put that time into it. And I knew back then it was a matter of putting the time into it. And yeah, some people just fall out of that love for the arts, and but that passion's always been there. And so it was never really a thing where I thought about I have to put in the extra effort. It was no, I'm doing something I love. Like when you're in the
Yeah,
midst of it, it's just a passion for it. And I see it in the students who are now professional artists. I'm at shows and conventions, and my former students are there as well, selling their books and selling their artwork. And they were always the kids that were just obsessed. They were always doodling. I would walk down the hall, and they would have their sketchbook open,
Oh,
where
that's
other
great to
kids
hear. Yeah.
would have their heads, in their history books or in their math books. They had their sketchbook out, and I'm going, "That's the kid. That's the kid."
Yes.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
So
I always tell people if you don't love the process, you're in the wrong business.
very true. Very true.
And that's exactly what that is. It's like you have to want to be in that sketchbook all the time, and you have to want to be buried in that page all the time. If you want a comic book, you're going to fail. If you want to make a comic book, you're going to do wonders.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I
mentioning
guess we should.
comic book. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, no, no. Go ahead.
Mentioning comic books, I need to know what comic books did you grow up reading?
Wow. I'd say the first batch of comics were actually old hand-me-down books from my older cousins. I had a stack of Jonah Hex and Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. So these are obviously, what was popular in the 70s, westerns and martial arts, and that's what I grew up on. So when I look back at that work, and again, I was flattening out those pages, those.
Jonah Hex, that's John Albino, is it? Oh, no, what was the artist name? Fleshier was the writer.
Yes.
Who was the artist on that? I remember because I used to have a lot of old Jonah Hex books.
It was a Filipino artist. It was actually one of the first artists from the Philippines to come over to North America. I'm trying to remember his name now.
Fleshier was the writer. I remember that.
Yes. Yeah. I can't remember, but yeah, I remember the Shang-Chi stuff was the early Mike Zeck work.
Yes, that blew me away.
Yeah, so I cut my teeth on, doing all sorts of martial arts stuff, all based on his work there, and a lot of my early drawings were all kung fu karate fighters, which was a natural fit, for superheroes and getting superheroes to do those poses.
And you mentioning doing realism, what's his name? I hope I pronounce his name right. Doug Monch,
yes, yeah.
His work was, detailed and real, and he did a lot of Shang-Chi work.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the level of detail, whether it be hatching and feathering, all that work. Like at the time, I didn't know that they were working with brushes to do ink and how the technique. So there was a certain magic to what was being done, and then once I learned the tools and once I learned the techniques, I still can't draw like them. But it's nice to know, how they put that together, the magic, how to perform that magic. It's it's there, but yeah. So I do definitely appreciate the level of work and competency that went into putting all that. And again, it's so tragic that a lot of those books don't exist today because it was just cheap throwaway entertainment, and it's like, no man, that's high art for me. Yeah,
that's awesome. We should probably wrap things up. So I want to ask you, where can people find your books?
Online, I have my store, so junctioncomics.square.site.
We'll put a link at the bottom.
Yeah.
And I'm in a few shops. So I'm out in the Dragon in Guelph, the Beguiling here in Toronto, and Wayside Comics up in Newmarket.
Awesome.
Perfect. Perfect.
So, I feel like we should have you on again because I think we could probably go on yarns about, telling stories and helping kids learn and introducing kids to stories and all that kind of stuff. So thank you so much for being on. I think you definitely brought an interesting angle into your creative method.
Oh, yes. A lot of it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. You know what? I love the show and how you put the show together, focusing on the arts and techniques. And again, it's really a show for us artists to learn and see what's going on out there. Again, most of us are in a vacuum, locked in our studio, and so getting the opportunity to see what other artists are doing elsewhere, artists that we don't perhaps get to meet at shows, is a great opportunity. But I think it's also great, for younger artists too, to get on the show as well. Yes. and watch and see what's being done as well, because it's that mentorship. And one of the things I've noticed attending a lot of the shows and conventions and arts festivals is that there's definitely a sense of mentorship. The artists who've been doing it 10, 20 years, they're helping out these artists who are around for 5 years, and the artists who've been around for 5 years are definitely helping out the new kids who are just coming onto the scene. So there's definitely a strong comic scene around here in the Golden Horseshoe, and a lot of it has to do with that mentorship that I'm seeing, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great to hear. It's very awesome.
Well, thank you for being on our show.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I think we'll definitely have to have you on again.